My name is Julia Langston. I own 5 boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest and the most sought-after catering company in Seattle. I've hosted diplomat CEOs and on one memorable occasion, a royal wedding after-party. But the call that shook me the most wasn't from a client. It was from a wedding planner named Marissa. She said my family had canceled my invitation to my own brother's wedding, the one I paid for, the one held at my flagship hotel, the one I had personally funded with a $65,000 deposit, non-refundable. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I leaned against the wall outside my conference room, let the hallway blur for a second, and asked her to repeat herself. She did. Calmly, professionally. Like this sort of betrayal could be managed with spreadsheets and place cards. I could have asked why. I could have begged for clarification for inclusion. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something chilling. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. So I asked her to deliver a message. Not a threat. Not a plea. Just a line from the venue's contract section, 9 Clause B. Then I hung up, straightened my blazer, and walked back into the meeting. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's legal. There was a time when Colin Langston would have thrown a punch for me. We were kids, then raised on takeout and silence in a rented duplex outside Louisville. Mom worked nights at the hospital Dad left when I was 8. Colin became the person I counted on, the one who walked me home after school and let me cry into his hoodie the night I didn't make choir. He was 2 years older, but somehow 20 years wiser. He knew when to make me laugh, when to just sit there. "I've got you," he used to say. Just 3 words. But they covered everything, bruises, report cards, even the night we came home to a padlocked door and had to sleep in the back seat of Mom's car. He meant it. When I was 17, I got accepted into Cornell's hospitality program. I couldn't afford it, not really. But Colin picked up shifts in drywall crews, saved half his paycheck, and mailed me a check every month for 4 years. He never once called it a loan. He stayed in Kentucky, built a small contracting firm from the ground up. I graduated, moved west, started as a front desk agent, and worked my way up. First assistant manager, then operations director. By 31, I owned my first hotel outright. Now I own 5. And Colin. He was the first person I called when the ink dried on the deal. He flew out that same weekend and brought me a bottle of terrible bourbon and a hug I didn't know I needed. We talked about doing something together, Langston and Langston maybe. Hotels built from his bones and run with my rules. It was a dream we never fully said out loud, but it sat between us like a second heartbeat. Then came Evelyn. He met her at a gala in Lexington. She was old Kentucky money pearls posture like a ruler. Her mother ran in philanthropic circles and talked like she had the final say on everyone's worth. Evelyn smiled tightly when Colin introduced me. "Oh, you're the sister who works in hotels." I didn't answer. I just watched her scan the room for someone more impressive. That was the first fracture. Small, silent. But I felt it. Still, when Colin called to tell me they were engaged, I didn't hesitate. "Use the Langston Grand," I told him. "It's yours. The ballroom, the rooftop garden, the catering. All of it. My wedding gift." He choked up. "Jules, that's too much." "No," I said. "It's what family does." I meant it. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that for some people, family only counts when it fits the photo. And I wasn't in theirs. The first time Evelyn saw the Langston Grand, she didn't look up. She stepped into the marble foyer like it was a dentist's office, glancing at her phone, nodding absently at my staff, and murmuring, "Huh!" Smaller than I imagined. Her mother, Charlotte, wore a structured suit and a face like permanent disapproval. She trailed behind Evelyn, her eyes scanning the chandeliers like they'd personally offended her lineage. "This is your flagship," she asked, running a manicured finger along a mahogany banister. "I suppose it's quaint." Colin stood beside them, silent, jaw tight. I stayed calm. Professional. I walked them through the ballroom, explained how the space had hosted senators, Grammy winners, and most recently, a tech billionaire's daughter's wedding. I mentioned our Michelin-trained chefs, our florist flown in monthly from Napa. Evelyn barely nodded. Do you allow real champagne for the fountain, or just sparkling wine? I smiled. Dom Perignon, if you like. Or Krug if you're aiming quieter luxury. She blinked, then scribbled on her planner. By the end of the tour, I'd offered them my top-tier wedding package, discounted naturally, and a $65,000 deposit to secure their date, the space, and initial catering services. Colin tried to object. "Jules, this is too much. We can't Evelyn cut him off." "We'd be honored," she said quickly, eyes gleaming in a way I didn't trust. "You're so generous. And this venue might just work, with a few upgrades." Upgrades. That was her word for removing a chandelier installed by hand in 1907. For replacing 300 satin chairs because they were too ivory. For asking our pastry chef James, who once baked for the French ambassador, to submit 5 more cake prototypes. They never copied me on emails. Never looped me into tastings. Victoria the planner was polite, but cold, taking notes Evelyn dictated like commandments. My staff looked exhausted. My event coordinator started calling them the Holloway Hurricane. But I stayed quiet. Because this was for Colin. Because I still believed somewhere deep down that if you gave enough, endured enough, stayed gracious long enough, people would see you as family. I didn't realize, at least not yet, that some people don't want a sister. They want a sponsor. 3 months before the wedding, my cousin Dana called to thank me for her invitation. Gold foil handwritten notes, the whole thing, she gushed. Very Evelyn. I love that she signed it personally. You must be exhausted from planning. I smiled into the phone. Yeah, it's been something. Then I hung up and walked to my mailbox. Empty. Again. I told myself there was a mix-up. Maybe Evelyn assumed I didn't need a formal invite since I was hosting. Maybe they'd send mine by hand, or courier, or pigeon. But then the bridal shower happened. I saw it on Instagram, long tables in a rose garden, women in white linen, Evelyn glowing center frame. Colin stood at the edge of one photo, blurred but present. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even mentioned. No one told me it had happened. Not my brother, not my mother, not even Dana. Still, I stayed silent. It wasn't pride. It was something harder to admit, hope. A desperate kind that clings to the last thread and calls it dignity. But that thread snapped during a logistics meeting. My venue coordinator, Rachel, was reviewing the seating chart Evelyn had finalized. I leaned over her shoulder, mostly out of curiosity. Table 2, Holloway family. Table 3, college friends. Table 6, Colin's co-workers. My name wasn't there, not on any table. I cleared my throat. Maybe it's under Julia Langston, or family maid of honor, perhaps, Rachel's face flushed. I was told you weren't attending. The room went quiet. I'm the groom's sister, I said, not loudly, but enough that the word sister sat heavy in the air. And the owner of this hotel, and the person who paid the deposit. Rachel looked down. Evelyn reviewed every name personally. I stood there for a moment, then nodded. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just walked back to my office, closed the door, and stared out at the rooftop garden I had designed myself. The one Evelyn would take wedding photos in. And in that silence, one truth crystallized: I wasn't forgotten. I'd been edited out. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I was in a quarterly budget review when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Ms. Langston. The voice was clipped professional. This is Marissa Thorne. I'm the planner coordinating the Holloway Langston wedding. I stepped into the hallway. Yes. Is there a problem? Pause. Just long enough to warn me. I've been instructed to inform you that your invitation to the wedding has been rescinded. Silence. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. Marissa continued. However, the family intends to move forward with the event at the Langston Grand, as scheduled, utilizing the deposit and services already confirmed. I leaned against the wall. Cold marble, warmer than her tone. I see, I said. I was told Mr. Langston is aware and has approved this adjustment. Did he say that directly to you? No, she admitted. The directive came from Ms. Holloway and her mother. Of course it did. And just to be clear, I said slowly, they've decided I am no longer a guest at the wedding I paid for. At my hotel. Using my catering staff. Yes, she replied, hesitating now. They mentioned your dual role might confuse guests, that you might be mistaken for event personnel. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how carefully cruel it was. They didn't just want me out of sight. They wanted me erased as a person and rewritten as the help. "Thank you, Miss Thorne," I said calmly. "I'd like you to deliver a message back to your clients." "Of course." I glanced at the plaque outside my boardroom. Langston Holdings, my name etched in brass. "Please inform Ms. Holloway and her mother that unless I receive a formal written apology and a reissued invitation by 5 p.m. today, the event is canceled. Effective immediately. Per clause, 9 Section B of their contract. Silence." Then understood. I hung up, smoothed my blazer, re-entered the boardroom, and for the first time in weeks I didn't feel erased. I felt sharp. They arrived at 4:52. Colin, Evelyn, Charlotte Holloway, and unexpectedly, both our parents. I watched from my office window as the concierge led them in their voices, already rising arms, gesturing like this was some social misunderstanding, not a business violation. I didn't meet them in the lobby. Instead, I asked my assistant to escort them to the executive conference room on the mezzanine floor. Not the bridal suite, not the lounge, no champagne flutes, no flowers. This wasn't a family dinner. This was contract enforcement. When I entered 5 minutes later, the room was buzzing. Charlotte pacing, Evelyn flushed and tight-lipped, my father awkwardly adjusting his cufflinks. Colin looked like he hadn't slept. My mother sat rigid, unsure whose side to land on. "What the hell are you doing?" Colin snapped the moment I shut the door. I didn't flinch. "Enforcing a clause in your signed agreement?" Charlotte scoffed. "This is absurd. You can't just cancel a wedding because of a guest list adjustment." I slid a printed copy of the contract across the table. Section 9. Clause B. Events may be canceled without refund if they pose reputational risk or violate the ethical standards of Langston Holdings. Evelyn's voice cracked. "We didn't do anything unethical. You accepted $65,000 from me?" I said, voice even while deliberately planning to exclude me from the wedding I funded at my own hotel. Our mother looked between us confused. "Julia, is this true? You weren't invited?" I turned to Colin. Maybe he'd like to answer. His jaw worked, but no words came. Victoria the planner was seated in the corner, unusually silent. Until now. "I followed Miss Holloway's instructions precisely," she said quietly. The guest list revision came directly from her and her mother. Charlotte spun toward her. "That wasn't meant to be punitive. It was intentional," I cut in. "And dishonest. And per your own signatures, I am within legal rights to revoke access to the venue catering and guest accommodations. Effective immediately." Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. "You can't be serious." "I am," I replied calmly. "Because this is no longer about cake and centerpieces. This is about being treated as if I'm disposable." I let the words hang, then added, "You don't get to use me and erase me." The silence after my last sentence wasn't just awkward, it was tectonic. Evelyn sat frozen, her fingers clenched around her designer clutch, like it was the last vestige of control. Charlotte muttered about legal recourse, but even she knew this wasn't about courts anymore. It was about decency. I turned toward Colin. "So tell me, am I just staff to you now, or do I still count as your sister?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes darted from me to Evelyn, then to my father, who stared at the carpet like it might explain everything. Our mother had tears in her eyes, unsure who to comfort. Finally, Colin spoke. "It wasn't supposed to get this far." "It got this far," I said, "because you let it." "I was trying to balance things," he said quietly. "Evelyn's family has expectations. Her mother wanted a certain look, a certain crowd. And I didn't fit," I said. "Even after I funded half the event. You're twisting it. No, Colin, I'm quoting it. Evelyn said I might confuse the guests. Might look like a staff member, at my hotel, with my name on the plaque in the lobby." His face crumpled. "You have every right to be angry," he said, finally meeting my eyes. But I didn't know how to stand up to them. I thought you'd understand." I stepped closer. I did understand. I understood when you stopped coming to Sunday brunch, when you let Evelyn cut me out of planning, when you didn't even send an invitation." Evelyn rose to speak, but Colin raised a hand. "Enough," he said. She froze. He turned to me again, slower this time. "I never stopped wanting you there. I just didn't know how to say it anymore." I studied him, really looked, and for the first time in months, I saw it the boy who used to split his paycheck to buy groceries. The brother who once sat outside my dorm all night just so I wouldn't cry alone after a breakup. He was still in there. Buried. But not gone. "I want you there, Jules," he said softly. "I want to fix this. I want to fix this," Colin had said. So I told him how. "I'll let the wedding proceed," I said, my voice steady. "But on 3 conditions." The room tensed again. Evelyn sat back down, arms crossed. Charlotte looked ready to explode. But Colin only nodded, waiting. "1," I said, "I get a written apology from both the bride and groom. Not legalist. Human." He nodded again. 2, I am to be treated not as a vendor, not as decor, but as your sister, at every event. No back-of-the-room seating, no side glances. Full respect. Agreed. 3, I continued the wedding program, will include a note, with love and gratitude to Julia Langston, whose generosity and vision made this day possible. I want the truth printed, black and white. No erasure. Evelyn opened her mouth, but Charlotte cut her off. "Enough," she said, her voice low. "We don't have time to play pride games, Evelyn." "I'm not playing," I replied, turning to her. "This isn't pride. This is boundary. And if it makes you uncomfortable, that's on you." Charlotte didn't respond. Colin extended his hand. "We'll do it. All of it." I didn't shake. Not yet. "Then I'll reopen the file with my events team." As they left the conference room, Evelyn brushed past, without meeting my eyes. But Colin paused at the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not slamming it shut." "I didn't do this for your wedding," I said. "I did it for the girl you used to protect. The one you almost forgot." He nodded, once eyes full. Then left. And just like that, I wasn't erased anymore. I was restored. Not through shouting, not through revenge, through clarity. And a boundary no one would ever cross again without consequence. The wedding went on. My name was printed in the program. My seat was front and center. And the ballroom glowed, every inch of it, a testament to the years I'd spent building something from nothing. Evelyn walked down the aisle like the star of a show. But Colin, he didn't look at her. He looked at me. And in that single glance, I saw something fracture and settle. Not regret exactly, something older, recognition. After the ceremony, he found me in the rooftop lounge, away from the crowds and canapes. He didn't say much, just stood next to me, staring out over the city skyline I helped shape. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore. It was honest. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Colin's handwriting. 3 pages. Apology, accountability, no excuses. I cried reading it. Quietly behind the closed doors of my office. Not because I needed the apology, but because I finally had a brother again. We rebuilt things slowly, brunches without fanfare, texts without obligations. And one Sunday morning, as we sat across from each other sipping coffee, Colin said, "I don't think I ever knew what family meant until I almost lost it." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. As for the $65,000, I never asked Evelyn to return it. I didn't need the money. What I needed was clarity, so I turned it into something better. The Langston Grant. A quiet fund for couples with real love and limited means. We sponsor weddings where no one's worth is judged by their shoes, their surname, or where they sit. Where family isn't filtered by power, but defined by presence. I attend the first wedding myself. 2 nurses, both women, both disowned by their families. They cried when they saw the ballroom? I didn't. Because I had already cried enough for rooms that once didn't see me. What I learned is this. Sometimes people don't betray you to hurt you. Sometimes they just don't think you matter. And that's the moment you remind them you built the roof they're standing under. And from now on, you don't wait for the invitation. You own the door.